Welcome, everyone, to another fine episode of Command Control Power. We are pleased to be joined once again by Michael Thomsen of Origin 84. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
That's great. Thanks for having me again.
All the way from Australia, we've got very minimal latency, all things considered. So it's great to have you. We always have to ask you, what day and time is it where you are?
Well, it's so you're recording on Tuesday night at 5 o'clock, and it's Wednesday 7 a.m. for me.
Wow.
Amazing. Wow. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us at this early hour for you. It's very kind of you to join
Yes,
us
thank you.
and accommodate our schedules here. So, so you've done a little bit of a catch up on our show, and I understand you have a little bit of maybe follow up and feedback you'd like to bring up. So should we start there? What comes to mind first thing?
Well, I think that the health department needs to put like a warning on your show if you do back-to-back shows as a listener. Like there's a certain level of sometimes rage that you want to like, okay, guys, you got to do this, you've got to do that, and if you listen show after show after show, it just like builds to a crescendo.
Mm.
But
Uh-huh.
like it's you're the helpless person who can't help the people who are, you might have the answer for. But I think one was
Sure.
really cool about the water bottles. The water bottle is a pretty popular thing around the place. We see them in the offices that we go to. But
Sure.
I used to work in the snow industry, and one thing when you're in the higher altitudes, you have to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
And the trick was when you're going and you're working on the snow, you can't go necessarily to a bathroom, but
Mhm.
electrolytes is the trick. So, Jerry, if you want to
Ah.
stop running
Okay.
to the bathroom, the water going in, if you put the salts back in, then your body stabilizes. So you won't
Okay.
be running to the bathroom quite as frequently. So electrolyte tablets are the trick.
Excellent.
So,
These are the actionable tips that our listeners tune in for. So this is, it's
Yeah,
really it's a
and let
good
me
point.
scold you for a second, Michael. No one told you to binge listen to our show. First of all, we actually don't recommend that for that
I don't
very reason.
recommend it either, but I didn't
Yeah.
know what
No.
you've been talking about, so I had a bit of a break, and I thought I better catch up. And no, it was good though. But what happens in 6 weeks is quite amazing when you think about like you listen to the first show, and then by the time you listen to the sixth show, a lot's happened, and you've unpacked problems. It's just really amazing. It's a good sort of how to say it, chronicle of how the
Hmm.
technology landscape moves quickly, and particularly when you're talking 6 weeks ago about Apple AI, and then 6 weeks later you're still talking about Apple AI, but in a totally different tone.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Interesting observation. Well, thank you for doing the work of listening back to back like that, because you can sort of pick up those trends and hear that where we may not even be aware of it, being inside it. But yeah, I mean, I imagine we'll still be talking about Apple AI, for probably months, if not years to come. Seems to bother me on a daily basis these days. But I did want to ask you both about your day to day use of actual intelligence. ChatGPT, for one example. I mean, they were pretty much first on the scene in this latest kind of renaissance of the AI tools, and they still have a lot of mind share and a lot of technical ability. So, I mean, I want to start with a real basic question. How do you both use ChatGPT or whatever your AI tool of choice is for just day to day work tasks and things like that? Do you have an app that you like? Do you just use the OpenAI website? I'll just share for one example off the top. I just added the ChatGPT website as an web app to my dock. I mean, it's just as simple as that. I find that makes it more top of mind, easier for me to get to in its own environment there. But I've got to be missing something. So, Michael, what's your recommendation? And then, of course, I'll love to hear from Jerry too.
Oh, it's pretty broad, and I think from our perspective, we see a lot of AI use, within our client base as well. So I suppose I'm very quickly informed about how the landscape shifts based on problems that may arise, or like functionality that just arrives that we weren't aware of, and then have to work out how to either implement it, contain it, or just stop it. So
Mm-hmm.
to talk about us personally, we have all the flavors. Unfortunately, I think you have to be able to speak, with some level of authority over those different
Mm-hmm.
products. Gemini, I suppose at the beginning we were sort of saying, well, Copilot was better than Gemini. Gemini being included in the Google Workspace, most recently, there's a lot of hype about Google, Gemini 2.5, and we've found that to be, very, very strong and capable when it comes to complex tasks such as, PowerShell creation. So there's features and benefits, I think, on both, but my muscle memory is to go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT knows my personal tone very well. But then again, I was writing some emails last night, and I wrote them in Apple Mail. I just selected the text, and I just had a proofread with Apple AI, and it actually was quite delicate, I suppose is the right word, to sort of just did the right amount of adjustments to make things coherent. Outside of that, some of our clients are creative agencies, and they're basically replacing photography studios with generative AI for images.
Wow.
So it goes the full spectrum. But day to day, I feel that there is going to be a bit of a battle between how these products just now start to integrate into your day to day. But Google, I would 100% right now say that I feel that Google has a competitive edge because the Gemini inside the Google workspace, specifically as an admin on the Enterprise Plus plan, you can find security vulnerabilities quite easily because you can just naturally type in a search such as, can you refer me to the files that are externally shared without any password protection or any sort of login requirement, and it will start to catalog those for you. So I can see that this augmenting our capability as admins, but on the other side, obviously the people who are doing the work inside the business, the strength of search across the drives that they have available is going to be very powerful too.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you bring up the level of integration too, and how, each major vendor has their own flavor of AI. So I've been seeing that as a trend in my client base also, whereas clients used to use a combination of things that grew up organically, like they have Dropbox because they've been using it for years. And then, but some people use Google Docs and, and then they kind of keep that going a little bit as well. But they're on a Microsoft 365 email, hosting plan. And so then they're not using the built-in tools like Teams, and OneDrive and SharePoint, et cetera, that are all integrated into the system they're already paying for. So now there's a trend lately to consolidate into that main service. So whether you're in Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, I imagine people are going to be using the built-in tools there, including, their flavors of AI, rather than, trying to use a piece from here and a piece from there. And that's a great example you gave where Google has the insight into, it has access to learning about what files and how you share them for one really good example. So that's a great point. And Jerry, are you using, like, just similar to what Michael's describing, like just the built-in proofreading function? You often share with me and Sam, like wording that you've sent to a client, that's clearly AI kind of, massaged. Like, do you use ChatGPT for that pretty regularly, or what's your methodology there?
Yeah, I mean, I exclusively have been using ChatGPT and becoming more and more reliant on it. I might have related most recently, I became a regular subscriber, paying to $20 a month with a personal account. I try to save where I can. So if you have a business email address, they'll charge you $25 for a single seat for a business versus the personal. And the reason why I happily actually paid the extra money was I was hitting my limit. So you can get most of the features and the functionality with the free account, but then you hit the ceiling where you have to wait for a certain time. But again, I have been using it. I can give you a couple of examples. Well, first of all, in ChatGPT, you can customize it. So there is a way to, and what I'm using for ChatGPT is not a web app, but they actually have a downloadable app from the Mac App Store. Not using their API, but just logging in with your ChatGPT account, and it's a complete interactive interface. But it's supposed to remember things about you. So I figured, like, okay, with the paid account, it would remember spelling errors. So I'm writing to this one client called Desiree, and they keep on spelling her name wrong, and I correct them, and they go, "Oh, okay, gotcha. We're gonna, make sure that we remember that." And then the next time I send to Desiree, they don't remember. So there's these certain real simple things that they're supposed to do that they're not doing. However, for me, it's a struggle to, especially when it comes to a really complex problem or procedurally what are the next steps in relating with a client. Like, okay, we're going to order the equipment. It's going to arrive at my office. We're going to configure it. We're going to send it out to you. So I'll just go into ChatGPT. I'll just do a mind dump and I'll say, rewrite this for me. Just throwing it all out there like a big jumble, and I'll hit return. And within seconds, less than a minute, I've got a completely cohesive well thought out email that's not all over the place. And it saves me tremendous amounts of time. So it's just a win for me. My wife sort of chides me on this, and she said, well, you should develop your writing skills and you should be working on that. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but this would take me, at least 15 or 20 minutes to put together, and I can do something else with that time, Right. So it's been a godsend for me. The other thing I just shared with you and Sam, one more point. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but most recently I got a domain notification from GoDaddy. Unfortunately, I do use GoDaddy for my domains. Shame on me. And it's my primary domain. And so they were saying, oh, your new .com domain renewal was going to be $30 US or something like that. Some really high amount. So I'm like, this is crazy. And I know that GoDaddy has a domain buyers club that you can join for, I think, $120 a year. They have a basic and then a premium one for people who just like squat on domains pretty much. So I did an export. Yeah, I did an export because I have 28 domains, mostly centered around my business, and also some that I'm sort of keeping in reserve just in case Apple decides that they're going to do their, they own the word MacWorks. So at any point they could pull that rug out from under me and MacWorks would have to go away, and I wouldn't, I'd be a big boy about it because, but that's the fact of life. So I've got these 28 domains, like MacWorks Connecticut, support Connecticut, blah, 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 so Apple support Connecticut. And I did a CSV export. I just uploaded it to ChatGPT. And I said, take a look at the Domain Buyers Club from GoDaddy and see how much money it would save me with these domain renewals if I joined the Domain Buyers Club. And so it took a few more minutes for it to do that, but it actually said, if you join the Domain Buyers Club today and make sure that all these domains are moved in, you're going to save right off the bat $250 on renewals, over the course of a year. And then it said, would you like me, and it offered this out of the blue, would you like me to create reminders for you for 2026 so that you make sure that those domains get moved into the Domain Buyers Club as well? And I'm like, yes, please.
Yeah.
So it did an Apple script, and I ran the Apple script and it just put them in my calendar.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I love these real world examples. Yeah, it's another great example. And Michael, you were one of the first to kind of bring this into my mind, like 2 years ago, probably, or a year and a half ago, when we did our Apple Consulting, survey. Basically, we sent out a survey to our listeners. We got back a lot of results. I had to figure out how to sort of collate those into, answers that made sense that we could report back to our listeners. And I think your comment was something like, if you're not using ChatGPT or a similar service to take a bunch of info like this and then process it for you, think about it and report back to you, you're basically wasting your time. And Jerry's recent example that he shared with us privately and just now brought that to mind. So can you give an example along those lines of okay, I took, I don't know what it would be, a Google Sheet, or just here's a link to, the results in Google, and tell me something about, share an insight about these results. I mean, could you literally ask a question like that?
Yeah, look, I suppose using it on a day-to-day basis, some of the things that, I'll do, I'll sort of flesh out a process, a couple of words, a couple of key things that the process has to have, get the model to expand it, and then usually there's a task at the end where we might need to create a table for someone to complete. So you might be talking about if you've got user groups, what SharePoints might they have access to, for example, very small sort of task. But what we do is we just ask it to create the table, export it as a sheet, and it's done. Now that's not processing the data, that's just to get the data. Then if you get that data and a person who's completed this at the client side, it's like, okay, well, we have a range of people types. We've got a creative person, an accounts person. We've got a manager. They'll then say, I want them in this group, this group, that group, and usually it's incoherent because they just sit thinking about it. They're not aware of all the groups that they've got. That's where I find it's really powerful, because you just say, straighten this out. You can use some natural language like that and just straighten this out. And it's like, okay, this is the summary of the person type. And then our team can have that as a sort of a persona of what the person is. If you're a creative person, this company starts, that's what we have. And then we can just map it out very easily. So I think we do very like sophisticated stuff with it. So another example is at the further end of that is that we had a calendar sharing request from one of our clients. Now, if you're doing Microsoft 365 and you understand calendar sharing, calendars, I have a big grievance with calendars just in general. It's the most antiquated part of any productivity suite. But Microsoft particularly have problems where if you want to start sharing calendars and you want to use the big button that says share all calendars with all people, things like that just don't work. And they might work once, they don't work in a persistence basis. So client's request was, we want to have all calendars open to all people, and all new people who come on board also have to have calendars open to all people. Now, I do question why they want to do that, but I don't, die on a hill over it. There's usually two reasons why. It's either they want to make sure that things are efficient or they don't trust their team. But there's a balance there. Anyway, that's their business. But what we needed to do is go, well, you've never actually taken your previous staff members who we've offboarded. We never deleted their accounts. And so you have a list of ex-staff members. And I think you probably know this. It's like, just in case, we'll make it a shared mailbox and we've got it for later.
Yeah. See it all the time.
Yeah. So when you start to open calendars up and these people don't work there anymore, you're going to open up previous people's calendars who don't have a chance to make events private. And so there's a confidentiality issue there.
Oh, interesting.
So, the simple answer from the client's perspective is, how about you just delete the calendar entries? And like, well, we can go in and do that, but every single calendar entry will decline the meeting. Right. And so do you really want that? Yep. Internally, externally, everyone's declined my meeting. Person's probably, either no longer there, works at a competitor. That's not cool. So we had to really think about this problem, more and more. To cut to the chase, Gemini was the answer there. And Victor, who's on our team, who nutted this out, just iteratively worked through all of these, if this statements that he had, but they were natural. It's like, well, if they're an ex-staff member, we can't do this to that. And it just ultimately generated this beautiful, very long, but sequential script that we've run. And it's just worked a treat. Now, it's prototyping. It's just like doing it yourself. You have to try it. Okay, that didn't work. You have to know what you're doing. But the syntax, that's really important, that the syntax is right, and that's what it's getting right. And we've never seen that so consistent in a sort of a mainstream model than what it is in Gemini right now. So I'm not an Apple, advocate for AI or Google. It's just, I'll take which one works. And right now that is the one that I feel is working the best. But I will just quickly say, products like Notebook LM, where you actually put the information that you want into the learning model that it's trained, you're training it on just that data, that would be where, Jerry, you'd find there'd be some success with what you're saying with, naming and how and why, because it's only going to be working off that data. And then the other thing in ChatGPT is creating I think they're projects. I can't remember what they're called. But if you create a project, a lot of you just start at the beginning of your request, like from information in this project, and then it knows the references only the things that you've talked about in that sort of project folder. And so learning how, I suppose this is the key thing, learning how to navigate search or generate prompts in AI that is the new, we used to say he who Googles fastest wins. Now it's like he who commands, AI better wins. And that's the key. So looking out for tricks. So if it's hallucinating, and I think that that's a really key part, process development, for example, with Jerry, you're saying like, I want to build a process. sometimes it makes a process that's 8 times longer than it needs to be for a 2-step process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just creating things and bringing stuff in from everywhere. And it's like, well, this is not relevant. You can actually ask the prompt to not hallucinate. And I was only taught this last week, and I'm just like, oh, that's cool. So what it's doing is like, just don't dream shit up. Sorry. And bring it in. Just don't hallucinate. So you can beep that one out. Yeah. So
isn't it interesting that we have to ask though? Like Jerry gave this example recently where I forget what the example was, but something along the lines of like, I said this and it told me the answer. And then I had to tell it like, no, like you're totally wrong. You just made that up. And it's like, oh, thank you. Yeah, you're right. Like, silly me. It's just this weird dynamic to have to like coach the thing to do what you want. And just to have to include something as basic as don't hallucinate. Like, what's the threshold there? Like, they need to maybe tweak that on the back end where it's just like, like just don't hallucinate at all. I mean, is there a benefit to hallucinating to some degree? Like, what's the right, secret sauce there? Like, why do we have to ask? Is my question.
I mean, Adam Engst had the angle. What was it? That ChatGPT was a 8th grader. like a something like a year 8 student, and that's true. It behaves like a year 8 student. If you chastise a kid who's 14 because they've like given you the wrong answer, they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. But it almost actually has the persona of a year 8 child.
So, really
and so yeah, look, I don't know. I think these are mass market products too. So you have to remember there are lots of people who aren't that intelligent who, become a little bit more intelligent because of maybe being able to collate information this way.
Right.
But anyone that has, to Jerry's wife's point, writing skills, anyone who has analytical skills, you can see it a mile off when it's been AI generated. And the actual craft, I feel, is to work out how to take something that has started off with very limited, personal input, churn it through to make it actually sound like you and not look anywhere like AI. And that's still hard to do.
Yeah. You still have to have the underlying ability to, craft a sentence and have a voice in your communication. And Michael, you mentioned earlier, it learns to sound like you to some degree. So do you find that just happens naturally from using ChatGPT and just being signed into your account, maybe dumping in some emails and things and like in your coaching of the bot? Or, do you have to like specify things manually to help it like sound like you?
Well, I have a localization problem where everything has the letter Z. And so I say, look, write in Australian English. And then it gets to a point where it sounds a little bit too analytical or a little bit too something. I say, rewrite in the tone of Michael Thomsen, and it knows my tone. And if I, want to throw it to a little bit more, regional Australian, you can, tell it to do that, and it'll throw in a couple of Australianisms. So I think crafting that through, I found that this, to Jerry's point, it's not that good at remembering, but the factor here is this is generative AI. So we have to understand what this actually means. So if, for example, we go to illustrations, and illustrations is probably an easier example than words. If you put an image into an AI tool and you say, do this to it, and it might be like, here's a sunset, and you want to add a filter, and you want to have it put a sailing boat in the background, and you go, this was awesome, this is just what I want this to be forever, and every time I do it I want it the same. Can't do it. Every time is a next time. So there is a misunderstanding somehow between running a process such as a workflow across an image versus using AI to generate one after the other.
It's not deterministic. AI is not deterministic, whereas like running a Photoshop process or a workflow or whatever is, you're going to take the same starting image, run a series of tools, and get the same result every time. But to your point, maybe the hallucination is what makes it non-deterministic and somewhat creative, and maybe that's the balance they're trying to find.
Yeah, and knowing when to get out. So when you've got a reasonably close answer, don't keep trying to get it to perfect it. Just stop, take what thing was that was closest, put it back into a new chat, and just start on that.
I want to bring in. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to actually bring in some feedback from Adam Rice in the chat where he mentions this point. In a long conversation, you can get to a point where it loses context. But if you want to sort of like, if you feel like you've achieved some understanding and like you're at a point where you want to then build from there, he'll stop and he'll say, summarize what we're doing in a way I can use as a new prompt. So basically, you let it feed back to you like, here's like how to get back to this point efficiently, copy and paste that into a new prompt, and basically start fresh from that point. So you lose a lot of that baggage where now it starts to include things from earlier that were actually like a dead end or that kind of thing. You can kind of just start fresh. I love that idea.
Another example of this was I was having ChatGPT create a form for me, and it progressed, as Michael said. After a while, you have to stop and maybe do a new prompt with it because it started to get worse and worse. So every time it would generate a new Word document for me, and it can do that for you. It's so powerful. You could say, make this a downloadable PDF in letter size or whatever. But this particular exercise I was doing, it just got worse and worse with the formatting. So it was like much better right in the beginning. It kind of had the essence of what I was looking for and lost it along the way.
Interesting. Any techniques for that, Michael?
Just go. Yeah, you just have to know when to stop. I mean, it's actually just It's like maybe a life skill, right? It's like you need to know when to fold them.
Right.
Or it's like, I'm not a chef, but chefs do this, right? Where they start taking the dish and they start adding too many ingredients to it. And all of a sudden it takes this hard left turn and it goes bad really quickly.
Yeah. I do have something else to add, just sort of to bring it back to consulting, which is we do sort of have a responsibility to be, not experts on this, but at least good shepherds when it say this is where we need to go with this, stay away from that. What was very interesting was when Apple did release 15.3 and all of a sudden kapow, we have AI in every computer. So in Australia we have standardized student testing, so each year, grade 7 and grade 9 I think it is, they do standardized testing. What people weren't aware is because people bring their own computers to school, all of a sudden there's kids with AI in the actual computer. So in a secure browser, even though it's in a secure browser, AI was still allowed into there because of the system-wide nature of it, rather than it being a extension or something like that. And so all of a sudden, some people have got AI support in these standardized tests, and it's just this problem is everywhere. And
interesting,
we're working with clients to firstly explain to them, look, there's AI in your computer, whether you know about it or you don't. We can turn it off with fully managed control if that's what you would like. But more the point, how many AIs do people cross over during their standard business day? And so we have done a couple of sort of knowledge-based style articles. They're not fully technical. They're not, going to be research papers by any stretch. But what they're sort of saying is, this is where people will bump into it. You need to have a policy around this. If people are using it, the best thing to do is get in front of it and say, well, look, how are you using it? Maybe it can benefit your business more widely if people are, but please ask. And then the other side of that is please pay. So don't do things for free, because if you're doing it for free, like we've said with Gmail, for the longest time, you are the product. And, ChatGPT, you need to get to the Teams plan or the business plan where you're paying money before they actually start to say, well, we won't train the model off your information. And where this becomes really, really important, and the example I can give is sort of, if you had a new basketball franchise opening up and it was, people knew that the franchise was starting, but they hadn't named a coach. If someone working for the franchise was trying to create a press release and they put in the person who is the coach about to be appointed name, you have a very interesting, narrow piece of information that doesn't really exist anywhere else. And because that is unique, it may return somewhere else as an answer to a question.
Right.
And so it wouldn't happen with Google because it wasn't published. But in a model environment like that, it's trying to be as smart as possible. And it's like, well, this isn't validated, but I think this is the actual answer, so I'll put it in there. And then all of a sudden, you've got some clickbait, right? Someone creates an
Right.
article saying that this person's the new to be appointed coach of this. And just so we're very, very bullish on saying you're allowed to use it, you have to pay for it. And if then you want to turn around and go and you don't want to use it, then we have to sort of also pay for it in some ways to contain it, because you can't stop people from using it too much without sort of claiming domains and so forth. So yeah, I think Anush from Advisory also had he shared a sort of an article on AI in the Mac admins at some point in time. I saw that's his reference to his clients. I'll have a look at the ones that we've got. I'm happy to share them with you if they're not too sensitive. But we also said with 15.3, we didn't send out a pre-release advisory. We didn't say, hey, everybody, Apple's coming out with Apple Intelligence. This is what it's all about. Because,
be afraid. Yeah.
Well, I was more like, I don't trust that the implementation matches the documentation. And like usual, that's true. It didn't. And so we're just like, we're releasing this advisory now because you're now seeing this. This is what you're seeing. Contact us once you see it if you have any concerns. And so we can all use these as opportunities to contact our clients, to give consulting and advice. I don't really want to tell people how to do their jobs with AI, but I certainly want to make sure that they know that their staff needs to have a policy around AI, which is different to cybersecurity, because they are going to be versioned quickly and differently. Staff need to agree and understand, because the amount of data leakage, and this is where I'm sort of living my life at the moment in compliance and certification for ISO 27001, data leakage is just the biggest problem, because for years and years and years, we just trusted that staff would do it. But now there's so many malicious automated bad actors out there. We have to try and work out how to contain it, but not have people stop doing their jobs effectively.
Right. Yeah, that's the balance here, is that these tools can be very, very effective and can be a force multiplier for people, especially, it really at all levels, but on the lowest level, you can have someone who doesn't have very much writing ability, who's able to communicate with the public, with clients, whatever, where they weren't able to as effectively before. So it can empower employees. And so you want to enable employees to seize that power, but also, to your point, there's a huge risk of data leakage. And I love this example of, like an unreleased announcement that's being prepared in the maybe week or so leading up to like a big public announcement, where if you're using these tools to prepare that material, that information may not exist anywhere else other than in this tool, and that tool gets really clever and might report this learned knowledge to someone else who doesn't have access to that proprietary information. Having examples like that are really important. I've gone a really long way training clients into thinking about security through the example of credential stuffing, and how, you can have a breach that then ends up where your password maybe from 5 years ago, you don't use it that often anymore. But the fact is it was there and it has leaked. And now hackers have tools that they can use to, use credential stuffing to basically get back a list of your accounts that still use that password. And so you might not have had that mental model. Like you might have thought, well, no one's going to think my dog's name and the year we got married. Who's going to know that? Well, it's not about that. It's about the possibility of a leak that affects all of your accounts, and they have a breakthrough about that. So if you can give them this example of a basketball team, or make up your own example that speaks to your client, that goes a long way to helping them understand the problem. So how would you then address that problem? Because they might say, well, I do want employees to be able to use AI. Is it a training problem? Like they need to understand not to put proprietary info into the model, but to maybe pull out that little bit and use it as put in a placeholder instead of the coach's name, Mr. Smith instead of, Mr. So-and-so.
The answer to that is that's where you go between doing someone's job for them and providing a tool set for them to do their job. So I balance this very carefully. The answer from a consultant side is that you need to have more eyes on more data points across the user's experience, both on a device and online. So where we get to there is the policy can say don't do it. Now, we've had policies in place for years. People follow them, people don't. People don't get, some kind of, warning, and then they get fired if that's what happens. But the damage is done, right? If the policy is not followed, to reputation or to data leakage. So the policy has to exist. And I think just at a really high level, one thing I'd like to sort of mention is that everything we do, that we decide in our businesses to do, in a process, is governed by a policy. That could be, your ethical policy. It could be, a set of like rules that you want to do technology by. But the sooner those policies are documented, and even if they're documented flimsily, at least they're a North Star to go to. And I say that all the time, where it's like, if we put some controls in place, the why is the most important, because if the people don't understand the why, then the control feels like a little bit inhibitive. But also, if the control is not defined by the policy, then I don't know which way to zig and zag as things move in time. So with all of these things, we can go into a client and say, well, what's your vibe? Cool. Your vibe is like, you don't care. Great. Well, we'll care a little bit. But if it goes wrong, you said you didn't care. Or the other type of person is that, you want to lock it down really tight. And we're like, well, we can't. So we can lock it down here and we can show you this. So a good example is if you're using Microsoft as a tool set. So, at the base level, you can get yourself to like business premium, which I think should be the standard that most people who are using Microsoft as their productivity platform are using, because it gives you the sort of best balance of tools for price. But then you go, okay, well, how are we matching the data on the email to the data that's happening, the traffic that's on the computer? So from DNS, for example. Well, Defender from Microsoft is there, right? So you can buy Defender, you can put it on the device, you can get some analytics from that. And so straight away, you can start to get 2 data points on what's going on. Then, further and further you go, you can sort of get SaaS application analytics if you go, to an E5 license. And so I know that this is all Microsoft centric, but, it can be done with other tools if you're using Google as your primary or whatever. But the Microsoft ecosystem kind of shows, a pathway, a very generic pathway of how to do it. So you follow their tiers of product and you start to see, well, the more data points you get, the more ability you have to contain. So, we've talked about CM in the past to capture all those logs. That's really important, because if we're not using a CM to put the logs in one place, you can't cross-reference the places that people are having those activities. So our view is this, which is we try and see what the people are doing on the device as best as we possibly can through analytics. We can get aggregated reports to say, we see traffic going to Dropbox, Box.com, WeTransfer, you send it, whatever it is. But you see the traffic going to ChatGPT, you send it, and so on and so forth. So when you start to just get aggregate reports like that, and the number of people sending traffic to these destinations, the business has to be showing that. And that's where the conversation starts, because I can keep coming back month after month and banging the drum on, like, we need to contain this, we need to do better. But until they see the report where it's spiking and all of a sudden people are using this, very, very heavily, that's where people get a little bit like, oh, we better do something. And that's where they pay for the enterprise plan, but they're doing it in a really knee-jerk way because they're just reacting to that data that you're showing. So I know I've kind of missed the actual question, but the way I'm sort of getting there is saying you have to, this is just a small component of the bigger whole, because token hijacking in sessions, right? That it's a very common thing that we're now starting to see. And it's the same thing. It is. We can't stop it from happening unless we have more data points. And the only thing we can do in between now and having those data points is just say, look, if it's a link saying that you want to join a SharePoint from an external company, please don't click on it. Yeah. And so we have to do both sides of the field.
Yeah, I mean, it feels overall like a moving target to me again. For a number of years, it felt like I had more of a handle on best practices for security, and of late, it's feeling like man, I need to double down on understanding some of this stuff, because I'm still finding even with MFA in Microsoft 365, users are getting phished. They're falling prey to those man-in-the-middle attacks, and they're having their sessions hijacked in one way or another, where then their accounts are being used to send out spam solicitations to all their colleagues. And sometimes we hear about it because we receive one of those and then we intervene and contact them. But it feels like, wow, that's pretty late in the process if I'm only hearing about it, luckily, because I was CC'd on something like a phishing attempt from one of my clients. So, I mean, and this is just a whole new, maybe less so security, more so privacy implication. But again, rapidly changing field here where, like you said, vendors are building it right in, whether to their platform like Apple or to their online portals and things as well. So yeah, staying ahead of it is really tricky, and knowing what to do. Like, okay, we see a spike of traffic to OpenAI's servers. Looks like your marketing department is getting pretty heavily into AI tools. Do we need to have a conference call where we can do some, training and best practices? Because, I mean, fundamentally, to your point, it comes down to user training. There's only so much you can do to lock any of this down, and people just have to be savvy enough to understand, what's a good use of technology, where to be extra careful, and how to be alert to these scams that are coming in at the same time. So, yeah, it's very it's a complex field that we're in, and it's changing very rapidly once again.
And I'm no technical genius. Like, I'm just a logic-based person. Like, it just doesn't logically make sense to let people have the door open, and like, or give people the keys. Yeah. So, the technical solve on some of this is sometimes, going to evolve, and be there given to us over time. So I don't try and solve the technical problem if there is no easy technical answer, because you just have to wait. But what I've also had to start saying to people is that, if you've got a good security posture today and you don't do anything, then you're wrapped. Like, it's almost like health in a video game, right? So if you don't, sustain yourself in the game, you're going to lose power just by like existing. And so you have to kind of keep, feeding yourself with knowledge and arming yourself with new things and harvesting that, you've got to power up every little while. But I think right now, between 2022 and right now, what was theoretical and kind of like maybe a desktop exercise for a security team is now here. And I had a conversation yesterday where I said to someone, they were like, why is this like this? Why are we still fighting this security thing? I'm like, well, yeah. You don't get Viagra ads anymore because we dealt with that. We know how to deal with Viagra ads, right? And the next, and so we don't get this type of attack very much anymore because we know how to deal with that. But this is a battle now. And AI, going back to AI is helping the, both teams, red and blue on this one, because as much as we can fight it with AI is iterating this to make it harder and harder to catch. So, I think that AI ultimately is dystopian, but that's, that's a totally other conversation with
I would love to dig into that. Maybe that's a part 2 or just a private conversation at ACES. But yeah, I mean, because it seems like any tool that advances, technology quickly enough is seized on by the bad guys, as quickly, if not more so. And there's such an incentive to do bad things, for whatever, like, easy, quick profit, that, those people will like spend the time to learn the tool really well, and then, up their game in terms of like the success of their phishing campaigns, even at something as simple as that. Because I've been saying for years, like, what's saving us from a lot of these is the fact that they're poorly written. They have problems in, graphics and things like that, and they're just not sophisticated in many cases. But AI can just take a really unsophisticated phishing campaign and make it look great, and it's going to affect 10 times the number of people. So something as just simple as that is a hard enough problem to solve. Let's go back to some positive uses of AI, though, because Adam had contributed quite a bit in the chat here, and I want to highlight some of it. I mean, something as simple as he's a lot more confident dealing with Windows using ChatGPT. That's super helpful, I think, to me as a guy who very rarely touches Windows. So that's an easy, basic one. But I love this idea of using like an AI tool. So whether it's ChatGPT kind of post facto, or a lot of them are integrated, like Otter.ai, and I'm sure there's a bunch of others now, where they can actually listen into your audio of your Zoom session, and then take the transcript. Of course, that's useful enough as it is just to have that, but then to like transform that transcript into a summary for the client, so you can ask for that. Shorter notes that go in your ticketing system, for example. So I think I hadn't even thought of that. Like, yes, like I understand I can have a raw transcript, but to actually then take the transcript and make my client notes from that, that's a brilliant idea that will save me a ton of time, potentially. And then lastly, he says it's great for catching I'll send you the link, and maybe you forgot to actually note that in your ticket live, it'll remind you of that. So, I mean, it's brilliant, brilliant stuff. So anything to play off of those so far?
If I'll jump in. Sorry, Jerry, if you've got something you want to add there.
Yeah, specifically for me and what he was saying with Windows, we're deploying this QuickBooks headless server on a PC, and we're in multi-user mode. And there's just some basic things where I don't know QuickBooks for the Windows platform intimately. I use it for my own content or accounting on my Mac. So multi-user mode, how do I create a new template? I just put all these questions in this ChatGPT. I don't have to go to the QuickBooks knowledge base, do a search. It just gives me this information. And if it's not exactly accurate, it's close enough to the mark where I can figure out where to go and how to navigate. And then another thing that just came to mind that was happening to me the other day, I'm cleaning out the basement. And Joe, you inspired me about a couple of months back. You went to your old office and closed that down, and you put a lot of pieces of old technology that you really didn't think you'd be able to move at all and just send it to I know you wouldn't send it to a landfill, but responsibly dispose of it. And Joe was throwing stuff on eBay. So I very quickly pulled some things from the basement, and I went into ChatGPT and I said, give me a very nice HTML formatted description of this product. Just gave it the name of the product, and I said, make sure that it's clear that I'm not a dealer, that this is coming from a personal person rather than somebody who's just fencing equipment all the time. And within seconds, again, HTML code, and I had these ads running really quickly. Whereas before, that was the most tedious task for me, was making sure it looked good in eBay, so I'd get some traction on it. So just so many different uses that I'm just now exploring and finding even more.
Amazing.
Yeah, similarly, we've found that those like long format things being condensed down to short format is the killer feature from sort of meetings mainly. Our account management process is effectively driven by Teams, recorded meetings, Copilot, and then we use Halo PSA as the primary source of all the information that we have on our clients. And so from that, our account manager can record the meeting, put the prompt in. It will summarize the meeting enough for him to then take the get the actions. But the actions are not just here's an action for you. It's like here's an action, but in the format to put it into effectively a ticket task underneath that client's work in progress call. And so from there, he can then run tickets inside the sort of the life cycle of the client's account management. And if he wants to then spin a ticket out to get some help from a support team member, he can then, launch another ticket from there. But everything is now becoming a ticket. And, you talk about CRM and you talk about, how to engage with clients and those kinds of things. I think the main thing is that you edit out the things that are unimportant, because there's a lot of noise and the signal to noise ratio needs to improve for us to be efficient. And so making sure you are really clear on what is coming through, what has been dealt with before. And when you're doing, and Teams, I can talk to Teams, but with Copilot in Teams, we have the same meeting invitation for our weekly or fortnightly or monthly calls with our clients. The best thing about that is that it knows what happened in the previous call. Right? Just like with ChatGPT, it knows what's happened.
Wow.
So when points get raised in a meeting, or we have to make a meeting summary before the meeting goes ahead, we can kind of just curate that very quickly and look like we're ahead of the game by sending an agenda. And
Wow.
clients, there's only one client that I have who sends an agenda in advance of a meeting. And the agenda that they send is literally their agenda. It's what they want to get out of it, or it's what they want to grieve about. But
Right.
when we send out the agenda, it's always about, here's a thing that we discussed that we need to like sign off because we finished it, or here is a thing that we didn't get through properly in the last call, or here's a problem that came up in the week between now and then. So I think, again, it is just a tool to give you the condensed or the information to put somewhere else, because you can't keep the information in ChatGPT. You can't really keep it in like Notebook LM even. You have to still put it somewhere else. And burying the good work that AI can do somewhere that can't be utilized is equally as wasteful as just not running it in the first place. The opportunity cost.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
Man, I feel like I'm doing this such a manual way. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years of like, as I'm talking to the client on the phone, I'm making my notes, or I'm thinking about it after the call, and I'm, documenting, and I'm doing that for myself. I have my notes that go out to the client on the invoice. I have my follow-ups noted there. I have some internal notes, about references I use that I might want to look at again or whatever, all manual. And I imagine if, one of these services were just listening to my phone call, how accurately do you think they would pick up on the signal, and leave out the noise in this kind of scenario? Does it work pretty effectively for you, Michael? It sounds like it does.
I think it would. Yeah, I think it would work really well. I mean, the calls themselves, I mean, if you're doing, I don't know how you're doing your support calls, but, the call itself is only as good as the phrasing of the people in the call. So we're very good in Teams, for example. We call into a meeting when we're in the room with clients because we need to get at least one recording of the meeting, so we've got that. When we're doing a remote call, it's even better because it knows who is speaking.
Two sides,
right? Yeah. And so it says, well, Michael said this, and Joe said that, and Jerry said this, and so then it can do better to assign. Oh, well, I said I will do it, so it's like assign task to Michael. So again, there's lots of nuances there about understanding how to get the best out of the tool. But for example, ticket standards. What do you want to see in a ticket when you give a client a response? Now, you're handcrafting every ticket response by the sound of it. You might have some canned texts there. You might put some stuff in there. But realistically, if I said to you generically a ticket standard of, I want you to put 3 lines of text into a ticket for every 15 minutes that you are billing for the ticket, right? I don't think it's overly burdensome to give someone like, 3, if you do 45 minutes, they get 3 short paragraphs of what was done. You can write that yourself, or you can actually do the, what I usually get from a support person is, I logged in, reset password, checked it worked, done. That's 4 words, 5, 8 words maybe. Put that into some kind of framework that knows the tone, model, and it knows that I did 15 minutes, I need 3 lines of text. So it's like, I did these things, took me 45 minutes, give me some results. Paste it into the ticket, send it, forget about it. The only reason we put the notes in the ticket generally is to remind ourselves if there's something in the future that comes up, or if there's a billing inquiry. The person reading the ticket doesn't care about the response because their problem's been solved and they've moved on. So we've just got to make sure that we've internally got the right level of information for the future for other team members. And then even more importantly, the future justification of what do you do for us? And by creating those longer format, well-worded, expanded notes, you look like a boss.
Yeah.
And it's about making the level 1 person look like a boss.
Yeah. I mean, for anyone starting out there today, it clearly this is the way to go, is to like start with a ticketing system, start with integrated, large language models, some form of AI in your call, from day one, and just have it be consistently in every call. I mean, of course, newer people are probably less concerned about privacy because all of that, has the caveat that, yeah, I mean, you're adding, ChatGPT to every single call, so they're listening to every call. But it seems like you get a lot of power out of that I've had to create manually from the start. I mean, I've just handcrafted every word since the beginning, and it's taken a lot of time. And there's I'm fast at it, relatively speaking, but to not have to even do that, to have that be done for me, and then I could just read through it and say, oh, well, it missed this one little detail that I definitely want to include, but the rest is 90% of the way there. I mean, that's a huge tool for someone starting out.
I'll probably just finish with one thing that is, commonly happening to us. So, AI can battle with AI until forever because they don't fatigue. Mm-hmm. So what we don't do is we don't allow external parties to do note-taking in meetings that our team members are in, unless we record the meeting and it's our note-taking. Now, that's our policy. So why we do that? Well, too many times do you have a meeting and someone's got Otter AI running in the background, and then they do a summary, and then they send you an email 45 minutes after the meeting is finished, and you're still having a coffee and just unwinding from it. And here are all the tasks that you have from this meeting. And I'm like,
I'm not ready for those tasks yet.
Yeah. Firstly, no, wrong. These are not the tasks. Secondly,
right, that too, yeah.
I don't work at your pleasure. Like, we are professionals and we're not janitors, so we need to go through and work out what's what. Right. And so we very much craft team member behavior to go. If there's a note taker in here, you say at the beginning something along the lines of, "I appreciate you taking notes, but anything that we talk about in this meeting, we will send you whatever from that after the call." So it's at the start, you say it out loud. It's sort of, you're not necessarily consenting to it, but you're certainly not consenting to them throwing it back at you and saying, well, you said this. It's it's almost like saying the thoughts and opinions of the person in the call don't represent the business, because they weren't prepared to be put on the spot and recorded forever.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
In this situation, I know that this will be recorded and it is forever, and so I'll put my
we'll take responsibility for that. Yeah. So
let me interject here for a second, Joe. I'm just grinning like a chimp here. Michael has this way of speaking. I would love to just be your shadow for a week. Because it's the way you present your material. I've told you this before live on the show, that you're extremely intelligent, methodical, but some of the things you come out with are just beautiful. I don't work at the pleasure of you, and I'm not your janitor. I mean, I love that.
I'm sure I'm going to be hearing you use that one with clients now, Jerry. That's a perfect one for you to steal.
It's fantastic.
I'm not a janitor is a great line. I'm a professional. I'm not a janitor. Yeah. Well, I love this concept of the battling AI, like AI battling each other, and they never fatigue. It reminds me of this is ancient history, but when the iPhone came out in 2007, and even prior to that, we had Blackberries and Trios. The people that had a mobile device that could do email had a huge point of leverage against everyone else, because they were able to do email throughout the day in bits and pieces as things came in. And so it was this sort of like asymmetric, response. Like, you sit down at your computer and you send 10 emails, okay? And that's your email session for the day. And all those different people are getting those emails from you. Maybe I get 2 of those emails. If I can quickly respond from my phone anywhere in the world, then I don't have to, you're not waiting for me to sit down later at my desk and respond. And so my ability to do email is outsized, compared to your ability to do email. And so I'm going to more quickly do email, and that's going to be a point of leverage, because I'm not going to have the same burden that everyone else has in doing email in sessions in front of their computer screen. That went away as soon as everyone had iPhones. Now it's just all it did was create more email for everyone, because it's just so much easier to send a half, written email and, misspellings and whatever else. It's now we have a burden to have to interpret. And so if you allow everyone's AI to be pointed back at you, and now, it's sort of like a similar situation where if your clients are taking advantage of AI more quickly than you are, you're going to be left behind in a certain way where now they're assigning tasks to you because it's all too easy for them to do that. They're following up more quickly. They're responding quickly to every email and request. And so if you're not leveraging the same tools to work as efficiently, if not more so than they are, that has a weird effect of like putting an undue burden on you. So we're in the early days still to some degree of this AI revolution. And I like this policy of saying, preempting their, maybe standard process of like including their AI and having an outcome from the meeting and assigning tasks, and instead just doing that right from the beginning and making that your policy. You're a professional. They're hiring you. You can have whatever policy you want.
Yeah, and just you don't know where that goes. Again, you don't know whether it's free, whether it's paid. Why, and a lot of people are doing this because it's there. They're not actually doing anything with it. I get notifications 6 months after a recording expires from a Teams call that we recorded. I don't care. Like I don't care. It could delete it after 3 days. Like it doesn't. I don't. Once we've had the meeting and like that bit of note taking is done, I don't need to go through that meeting and see any of it. But so we also just have to ask the question, well, why? And ultimately, I think that the skill that we have as consultants, and I think that I'm going to raise my usual gripe. It's like, if you're a true consultant and you're not a managed service provider, and I feel that what the two of you are doing is consulting and not managed service providing, you will be more profitable and you will have less chance of things going sideways because you are still engaging at a strategic and personal level with the decision makers and the individuals that you're supporting. I think where the scalability, and you'll see this in all of the MSP products that are out there in the marketplace right now to support MSPs to grow and scale, right? I see it all the time. And a lot of them are trying to use AI and they're using it so that they don't have to do real work. And ultimately, the person who's got the problem isn't the AI. The person that has a problem is a human with a problem and they need to get it done. And that boss is on their tail to make sure it's fixed or the work that they need to do is done. And an AI sending them some random KB article that it thinks is relevant to stall the process of responding to an SLA within a period of time just creates dissatisfaction. And so there is a balance to find in your own business between the hand roll and like the automation, but the human piece is the most important piece. If a ticket comes in, our policy is if you can't actually solve it within like the ticket information that's been provided, so like a change request for a user account, it doesn't need a phone call. But if it's a support request and you can't nail it with the first ticket response in an email, and you're going to need to find out more information, I expect a phone call to the person. Even if the person doesn't answer, at least they have a missed call from Origin 84. And you can leave them a voicemail and you can follow up in the ticket saying, hi, I just tried to call you. And that shows that you are real. And if you want to add dollars to things, automations are invaluable because they're everywhere. Human time is still the most premium commodity that we have to sell.
Yeah, great point. Michael, quick admin question here. So Jerry and I had planned to record a bit longer. We didn't actually ask you, I think. Do you happen to be available to continue on with us? Do you have
I'll
any
talk
desire
for as long
to,
as you've got.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So let's keep going. Excellent.
I might just grab a water bottle though, if you can.
Absolutely.
Just a moment.
Yeah.
1 second.
Yeah. Take your time. Cool. Perfect. Jerry, this will be a little bit for your edit, but all good to continue here with Michael.
Well, I was thinking, can we wind that one up and can we pivot?
Kind of pivot,
and make it more about himself and his observations. We don't know if he's going to ACES. Like make him a little bit more personal.
Yeah, definitely.
And his side of the business. What he's seen in the last year or since the last time he's joined us.
Okay,
that sort of thing.
I'm
like kind of like
public interest kind of background of Michael. Is that what you're going to say? Kind of like.
Well, yeah. I mean, from his business perspective, obviously some of the personal side, but also, personal. And maybe we could swap these shows.
Yeah.
So you could close up this one, and this could
Very, very nice command control power
and
sticker.
and we could at the end of the next hour, you could tease
Yeah.
this show where we get
Okay.
into
Flip the order around because
Yeah, that
we'll
works
start
the
for me.
with
order
it.
around.
Okay.
We went straight into it.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
dove right into AI, which was actually one of my topics to ask you about, and yeah, a lot of great material there. So I'll try to wrap up this conversation with one more little observation and a point from Adam again, and then throw it to you, Jerry, to kind of maybe reintroduce Michael and take us into like more of that side of things, business
Sure.
advice. Okay. So Michael, a little bit of what you were saying there before our quick break was reminding me of this concept of like a boutique consultancy, and I think like when someone put this idea in my head or I put it in my own head, it almost sounded pejorative. It's like you're just a boutique. You're like this little small, inconsequential, like a little shop on the corner. No one really visits, and you don't do much business. And I always looked at it, that's the pejorative stance, but I've looked at it as this like. It's the white glove approach, if that term is still around. It's the idea of, it's the human touch. Like we are communicating with people as people. We can empathize with them. We can provide an additional level of support. And it's not about, to your point, responding as quickly as possible with an automated response that is probably unhelpful, but at least you were quick about it. That doesn't really have any value to the clients that we tend to serve. And some of our maybe competitors out there have the growth mindset of like being as big as possible, huge scale where they can own a lot of the market, but the question would be like, how happy are their clients in those relationships? Is the client making a decision based on cost, minimizing the cost? Maybe the support goes down to 80% of the quality, but they're paying 50% of the price or something. Those aren't the clients that we're really interested in either. So what's the role here for like a boutique consultancy? And do we continue to like increase our price or hold steady with our price even when there are some people coming in maybe to sort of undercut the market with some more of these tools? How can we?
Now, that sounds like a real personal, self-serving question there, Joe.
Should I raise my rate again? That's the question. Yeah.
And a nice softball question for Michael to wrap things up, right?
Yeah.
I will say Apple has been a really interesting muse for me over my career.
Mm-hmm.
The answer that you need has already been shown to you by how Apple do business. So I'll unpack
wise counsel
here, right?
Please.
Apple inherently were a niche product, but that was only because they spoke with design language and they built something beautiful, but it cost more money, right? And so there was a decision being made back at the emergence of the PC. It was going to go gangbusters. Like they knew, Apple knew it, all the other players knew it, but Apple made a decision to make something that was better by being more beautiful or by being more user friendly. So then we fast forward a long way, and you get to being a ubiquitous technology company where you got all of this hardware. And somewhere in the sort of mid 2000s, the consulting piece became a need where Apple ran out of the ability to hire engineers to do integrations to put the products into like enterprise and corporate. And so they had to expand into these other areas to offer, services, but they couldn't do it themselves and they couldn't outsource it to like a multinational with like boots on the ground. It needed to be more local, more personal. And so with that, the consultant network kind of came into existence. That is what we are. We are Apple consultants. If there's anybody in the Apple consultants network that's a managed service provider, then consulting has to be a component of their offer. The managed services piece is just a marketing or a payment methodology of the advice that they're giving at the consulting point. So what I think is really valuable is to go, yeah, it might be boutique, but really what you're saying is that you're niching in to the consulting component first. And
Yeah.
with the consulting component, you can reduce the support burden because you're doing more intelligent strategy,
Mhm.
and then you get less noise. And I I can share these conversations in person, but we have a perversely small amount of tickets for a company of our size. But we
Mhm.
also have, if you wanted to look at it from an organizational structure, a really top heavy organization. So the support team members are inverse to the number of devices we support. But
Mhm.
the smarts come from having the intelligence at the front end to avoid the ticket in the first place.
Yeah.
So if you can get into the consulting mindset, you can show that value to the stakeholder that you're working with, and you're saying, we've got this, and we've got
Mhm.
this before you even knew you needed to get this. And the tickets, well, the tickets are always going to be there. They're going to float up and down based on, bad patches or, changes to this or whatever's going on.
Mhm.
You've got to move away from ticketing to consulting.
Mm.
And that's how you will win this battle. And being boutique means that you're focused on that. When you walk into a menswear place that has, Italian clothes, you feel $1,000,000 because the guy's like measured you up and he's like complimented on how you're like, looking really buff, and you may have lost, half an inch around your waist and all that kind of thing. It's all it is. It's just social engineering. And
Yeah.
with our clients, the consulting piece is just social engineering until you get to the point where all the answers to solve the problems are exactly the same.
Mm.
So there's only one way to secure Microsoft to a certain level. Like you have to
Mhm.
put all the buttons in the same direction, all the sliders go that way. So
Mhm.
what I'm sort of saying is that when it's routine and it's a task that you can get anyone to do, like that's fine. You can let anyone do it. But
Mhm.
lots of companies don't do consulting.
Mm. Yeah, I love this mindset shift. Where I thought you were going with this sort of like dichotomy between consulting and managed services was that the consulting is this, easy thing that anyone can do, and that's how we all get started. But managed services is this like thing everyone's aiming for. Going back a number of years, we always refer back to this show where Jerry and Sam and I kind of learned about managed services, right here publicly on the show all those years ago, and realizing like we really need to get on board with this. But to your point, that's a business model. That's kind of a methodology for supporting mobile devices, et cetera. But fundamentally, what we do is still consulting. And regardless of how you bill for it, the service we're providing is to be an interpreter for our clients, to be an advisor for our clients, to be able to help them understand, the right way to sometimes run their business or certainly to run their technology and to communicate that with them. And so that's a major component of everything we do. And let's not forget about that, and get caught up in which tool to use to be our practice management software to be able to automate more ticket resolutions or whatever. It's really, yeah, that's all fine and good, and that helps us with some of the efficiencies. But fundamentally, what we do is we're consultants. We hold a lot of knowledge and expertise, and that's what our clients are paying us for. And you can't replace that yet with AI and with automated ticketing systems. So maybe someday we'll have you back on when we get closer to that point in time. But for now, it's good to know that we still have job security.
Yeah, well, there's a user between the keyboard and the
Yeah.
computer. You're going to have a job. And so until we've outsourced the humans, then
Yeah.
we're all right.
Well, someday we're going to be arguing with AI, in the same way that today we say, please don't hallucinate. We're going to be arguing with AI about because they're going to replace the humans at some point, right? So to your point, like at some point, maybe there won't be a human in between the, keyboard and chair that's responsible for like 90% of the issues. It'll be an AI that's, responsible for the same issues. And we're going to be arguing with them on the internet. That's a dystopian future I don't want to imagine, but yeah, we're not far away.
And my last thing I'll say about MSP is that we haven't ever worked in an MSP because we managed to somehow luckily avoid that. because they didn't exist when we were going through our career journey. And if you want to work in an MSP, the first thing I would suggest you do is you go to Reddit into the MSP section and just read how horrible it is to work at an MSP. None of our colleagues run an MSP, because I don't think any of our colleagues in the ACN that I know of would treat any of their staff, any of their clients, with the contempt that I see in that space. And so all I would say is that the quality of the people that we surround ourselves on in this really funny corner of the world, the internet, which is the Mac admins, or in the market in the Apple consulting space, I think is pretty special. And I'll still say, part of that is people like yourselves who are willing to give their time to run podcasts and create community. And then there's obviously the up and down yo-yo of where Apple's at on that. But, to the point, like, the people who are, invested in this with heart are the people that you want to surround yourself with. And they're the people that you should take your guidance on how to do business from. Yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah, let's zoom out a little bit and speak more to the just general business, day-to-day running of the operations. Let's get a little refresher on where you're at, Michael. So, how big is your team these days?
We float around a team of 6. We have 2 outsourced resources. I think it's fairly common to have finance and HR outside of the core team at a scale of under 10. We've been pretty stable, and I think stability, again, I think I said this last time, I was all you can ask for is consistency. And consistency doesn't mean there's not change. It just means that we end up with a very similar result after a period of time. So yes, clients have come and gone. Yes, products have come and gone. There's been a lot of adjustments, I suppose, in the market in terms of technology and tools and so forth. But overall, our team, we're really happy at the size that we are at the moment. And we've talked about scaling and how that would look, but we also are going to find it really difficult to work out how to create integrity across another team of 10, where we haven't really got the processes in place yet to deliver that. So we're doing pretty well. On the counterpoint, the Australian dollar is not, and so it is one of those variables where we buy a lot of our tools in US currency, and that is like 11 cents less valuable today than it was a year ago. And so when you look at that from a client perspective, we have a couple of different things going on. So you might see a price increase from one of your vendors, and then you have to absorb or pass that on. And so we've got that same increase plus the fact that our dollar is less valuable. So our inflated rate for a product that we're reselling is significant. So we have an extra layer of consideration when it comes to some things in the economy. But it's overall, we're doing well.
Nice. That's great to hear. Yeah, the macroeconomic factors are, it seems like always something that's, if anyone could predict it reliably, they wouldn't need to be doing this day to day. They would, just have all the money in the world. But now more than ever, it's just so hard to predict. So I went through a period of time kind of toward the end of last year thinking, should we stock up on Unify gear? Should we, how can we try and be one step ahead of whatever, prediction models might say? And now here we are, making these same kinds of guesses. Like, should we, buy inventory now before it's all marked up quite a bit? I'm seeing people talk about including, tariff kind of tax line on an invoice, like actually call attention to the fact that this is this extra arbitrary, cost that's being added onto things. Of course, we're service providers, and so our hard costs don't change that much, but tools have gone up in price. And here I am trying to justify my next rate increase already. But, based on inflation, you do have to kind of stay, regularly tune those things. So I forget if you've mentioned in the past, Michael, adding something in where there's an expected increase over time to a contract.
Yeah, so our contracts they've got some work to be done because they've not really changed since about 2017 in terms of their structure. And I think the the price that we put forward for our clients is an annual price, and they can break that down however they see fit. They can divide it by the number of people, the number of locations, the number of months. I don't really mind. I know for me to take on a client of that level of complexity, I want this many tens of thousands of dollars per year. And if they don't want to pay that and they're in a meeting and they don't want that, they don't have that budget, it's a very clear no. Rather than coming in and saying, oh, it's this much per person, and then they try and do the mental arithmetic on the call and trying to scale it out. We just don't do that. We're just like, if you don't have a budget of this much money, then we're not the right people for you. And it shows the maturity of the person on the other side of the desk.
Yeah.
That being said, we do put a standard clause in the contract that the rates will increase, and it was set at 2.5%. And that was a trip clause mainly. So if we didn't negotiate a new contract, that it did move, and they would go, well, finance said that your increase on this invoice is higher than the one before. I'm like, well, that's because you didn't take the meeting I've been trying to get for 3 months to try and talk about your agreement, because it's no longer relevant to what we actually do. So you have to have these mechanisms in there to get people to the table to talk. And I find that money's a really good one. But then does that reflect the true situation of how much you need to increase your prices by? And so every time we sit down and talk about our rates, every time we talk about, what will our clients absorb, our tactic is really to understand the needs of the client, understand how much the problem is worth for them, and then provide them as much capability for the budget that they have. And so if that budget is generous, well, they're going to get further and more from us. If that budget is just the minimum to get into the sandpit, well, we will give them the minimum. But at the same time, we know that when you do the minimum, sometimes there are things that are outside of you that come in that you could have seen on a radar had you been a little bit more attentive, and we're just not giving them that little bit extra attention. So ultimately, it's a case of you get what you pay for.
Yeah, I mean, can you give examples of like something you wouldn't take out of a contract, to meet a certain minimum? Like you wouldn't take out, malware scanning or whatever, the case may be.
Yeah, again, I suppose it comes back to business model. We only charge for consulting. We don't charge for bundled tools into a packaged price. So when we talk about malware scanning, we make sure people have malware scanning, but I'm not selling them a malware scanner. I'm also not selling them, an RMM tool, or I'm not selling them the MDM. All of our clients own all of the tools that they use where absolutely possible. Maybe one or two tools are some of the secret magic that we want to bring, and that will be noticed when you're not working with us anymore, because it's like, how did they manage to do this? And now that doesn't happen anymore. You've got to have a little bit of that, pixie dust. But overall, what we're trying to do is move into that space where we're acting as your IT manager, we're acting as your IT help desk, we're acting as your whatever you want to refer to us as in your business, not IT janitor. But we want to be seen as internal. And if we leave, we want to make sure that whatever we have done doesn't cripple your business. So that's partially so we don't have to resell tools that may be in the currency that we can't control, and so they get the invoice from Microsoft and that's their problem. But I'm happy to not get a couple of dollars from the subscription if the conversation about price is directed to the vendor, and also if they don't want to pay for it. The first thing that will happen when a company is going into trouble, we're the canary in the coal mine. I've said this to a couple of our team members in the past. I'm like, that client's going to go out of business. And it's because they're late. It's because the way the conversation's going, it's like they're in trouble. And so we immediately go into protection mode, and we go and make sure our receivables are pulled in, so we have less losses. But if we were on the hook for licensing, and you hear this all the time, if you've supplied the service and they've not paid you for the service, then you need to cut them off. And you can't do that effectively when it's their email, because there is an ethical.
their email, their single sign-on, those kinds of major, tools like that. Yeah, I mean, you may not want to cut them off at the knees on those things, but you also don't want to be on the hook for paying. So I could certainly see the benefit of keeping that under their, accounts payable directly to the vendor. Also, that's a variable cost that will increase with the number of users, whereas you don't price it based on the number of users. So in any given year contract, will you have variation in the number of users you support at that company?
Yeah, again, when we strike a price, or we strike an arrangement, it has a set of data points, I suppose, that we would just refer to. Locations, how many do you have? Where are they? That's all known with the price.
Mm-hmm.
Team size, we say, well, this is how many you have. Are you planning to grow? Are you planning to shrink? We factor in maybe, say you've got 45 people. We'll just say, look, this agreement covers 50 people.
Mm-hmm.
But if it gets to 50 people, it will be a point for us to bring it into the conversation to say, hey, you're at 50. We've got a clause in the contract that says we'll charge you 200 extra per person over 50 each month until the renewal. Is this just temporary? Because I don't want to sting you for $200. If you're like, oh, look, Julie's hiring a replacement for somebody who's leaving, and so we've onboarded them early, cool. Don't mind that at all. Right?
Got it.
The same goes with you can't have all you can eat support. You have to track your time. And you have to have a measurement of what the maximum is before you have a conversation with your client.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that on a quarterly basis. So you can go over 3 months in a row and you won't get an extra cost. I'll look back after those 3 months of being over and just go, well, on trend over a year, we're actually okay. But if it's trending up and it's not looking like it's coming back for whatever reason, then we have to firstly look at ourselves and how we're supporting people, making sure that we're actually tracking the time correctly and we haven't double charged for time. But then we say, look, you're using more time than we agreed. We have to have a conversation about how we handle this, either in between now and when the contract is renewed, or we recontract to actually make the agreement match what's going on. But I think that the key there is trending. You have to have trends, and so you have to have good data. And the reason why is we don't like having conversations about money because it's just difficult. Clients don't love it. We don't necessarily love it. But if we can just say, look, you've gone over, and then we say you've gone over, and then we go, look, you've gone over 3 times. I think we need to talk about it. I think that's a very approachable way, because the one way that we used to do it, which is you go over and you get an invoice for extra, they were always fastest way to get someone upset is to send them an invoice for an extra support cost that they thought was included.
Right. And then justifying why and how it wasn't included. Yeah, you just get in the weeds. Yeah.
And so metrics and I've never loved reporting to clients. I think ticket reports don't do very well for anybody when it comes to justification of effort, because a lot of the effort that we do is sitting around thinking about how we can tactically approach a problem to contain a cybersecurity issue, but not interfere with productivity on the team, and communicate that effectively to the leadership, but still get buy-in without creating fear. And so you can imagine, you have those sort of gymnastics yourselves, and usually it's our closest loved ones that hear version 1 and version 2 of it, and then we put it out there into the world, and then they hear the response. So, I usually say that my wife is probably the best test case on any of this stuff, because, she hears me think it through. And so when we get to that, that's all time. And we now call that time when we're focusing on that. We actually put that in as billable time, because it's not benefiting my business. It's benefiting their business. So when we have a meeting for 30 minutes and it's got a strategic engineer and myself and somebody else in it, that's an hour and a half that goes against the client, because if we don't put it in there and we're only recording time against tickets, then it's very skewed what we do.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. Jerry, do you have a similar approach on time tracking, or how do you handle this kind of scenario?
Michael, I think I might have asked you this on the last show. Where did you get these chops? I mean, where did you get these analytical skills? And you're obviously, if you're not watching the show, you're a fairly young man. How did you arrive at where you are now? Because certainly I'm just sitting here most of the time pretty dumbfounded in the fact that, in a very methodical, very well thought out way, you have answers to all these nuances that we see on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of what you're talking about, you're generally working with larger institutions or maybe small offices where I don't want to speak for Joe, but I'm not seeing that. I've got the mom and the pop shops. I've got a few big clients, and then the rest of it is residential. So I don't necessarily have a lot of these challenging conversations that you're talking about, or subtle nuances to operating a medium to larger organization. But getting back to you, I mean, is there any? Did you go to business school? How did you? Are you just naturally adept at this? Because it just strikes me how much you have a grasp of the situation.
Yeah.
I actually didn't go to business school. So my background is that I trained as an architect. I did an undergraduate degree and I didn't ever practice at all. So I have a degree that I didn't use. And I think that's common for a lot of people who get to the end of something that they started off thinking when they were young, this is what you want to be. You get into the degree and it wasn't what you thought it was. However, if you flip the title of the degree from architecture and you put it into a degree in analytical thinking and critical analysis, right? So you have problems, you have a need, you have constraints, and you have all of these things. And so I think that education, a design education, really did help me sort of go, well, I can't include every idea I've ever had in this design because it's not going to be efficient or functional. So from that perspective, that's where my education sort of was founded. But I think the true education that I had was probably through my teenage years when you're working with small business. So, I used to, how quaint is this? Back in the 90s, I worked in a gas station pumping gas. I used to get paid for that. I used to wash windows on cars and check the oil. It's a simpler time and I love it. I wish I could go back to it some days. But you meet a lot of people too. And you have to come at those people how they are. And, it might be a mum with a car full of kids that doesn't have a lot of money. And this is, she's just like, get me out of here as fast as possible. You have someone who's got an expensive car, who's got all the time in the world. And, so I think that the school of life, teaches you how to approach people. So with the analytical from the architecture, with the learning how to deal with people, and then getting broad knowledge of the world, going and traveling and seeing different things, that has been a key part as well. So, I have lived in America. I did work with, ultra wealthy people in ski resorts and see how the mechanisms of that ski industry works, where there are people that are part of the machine at the bottom and the people at the top fly in. And, when you work out that you're a ski instructor and you're the story that someone goes home and tells their friends about, it's like, I'm a product. So I don't know how to answer the question, but it's from all places. But ultimately,
well,
when
I think I just interrupt. I think you're carrying you're underestimating your gift that you have, because we all walk through similar doors. I was a car hop at a Toyota dealer years ago, and I'm not sure I have the management skills that you have. So I think you're you deserve a lot more praise in that. But
thank you.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
The thing that I'm most proud of in my life has been the fact that I have employed people and I pay their mortgages and I put their kids through school. It is a massive privilege that people trust me as their employer to home them, to educate, to put food on the table. And I take that really, really seriously. It's scary to kind of think, if you step back, how many kids that I've helped pay through school and how many, months of mortgage payments that my staff have made, or rental commitments or whatever it is. And also there's been things where they just had dreams and they've fulfilled them. They want to travel and it's like, well, we'll give you the time to do that. So overall, I think being an employer has also informed that. So, I don't think the answer is simple, but I think it's just, this beautiful amalgam of different things that have made me who I am.
Well, it certainly shows. So tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of your personal time, especially maybe in the coming year or this past year. How much time do you take for yourself in the course of a normal year, and what do you do?
Yeah, well, look, a year ago, we were talking about me coming to the US to go to ACES, and a big part of that conversation was about me building fences in the desert. So I actually did come to ACES. I caught up with a few wonderful people there. Salt Lake City is probably my favorite city in the US. But I went down the Grand Staircase and did a reconnaissance, which was to go through the desert and look at all the fences that the cattle, because I don't know if you know much about this, but I'll teach you about it. In the desert, in the national, let me say this, I can't remember what they're called. They're not
Bureau
national
of Land
park.
Management, BLM
Yeah,
land, maybe?
BLM land, yep.
Okay.
So BLM land, they allow cattle graziers to run cattle on their ranches, I suppose.
Yeah,
Then
open ranges, yep.
Yeah, and so they put fences in to keep the cattle where they need to be, but then they get damaged over time, and when they get damaged, the native wildlife either can't get under it, or they can't get over it, or they get stuck in it. And so there's a survey to make sure that the fences were safe for the migrating deer. Okay. And so, yeah, I went out into your Utah desert, and it was fabulous. I would recommend anybody go down into South Utah. It is just an amazing country. You need more than a weekend to do it. So, but yeah, it was fantastic. And I think that sort of time away from my day-to-day, away from my family, my business, my culture, is actually really valuable to get that perspective. And so this year again, although I will admit it is less than 4 weeks until the actual ACES conference, and I am still on the fence whether I will buy an airline ticket, I am planning to come to Austin to the ACES conference, because although I am nervous about the economic and the political climate, I am so excited to see all the people who are actually emerging as the speakers for this version of the conference. Now, there are people here who I have had conversations with privately, people who have sort of been enigmatic, where I've never spoken to them and I've never heard them. They just people refer to them as this person. I'm like, this would be great. I'd love to meet them. So my plan is to come across again to the US, but this time I'm going to come for a 4-week stay. So I'm looking forward to coming across, having a bit longer time. And then, so I recharge by taking breaks, which justified by business expense to travel overseas, and then add on some personal time.
And how do you sell that to your wife, being away for 4 weeks? How does that work?
It's interesting. My wife works in the music industry, so she spends a lot of time away from home. Okay. So
Understood.
It's not a tit for tat, and there's certainly not like we don't chalk up my nights away versus your nights away, because it gets quite depressing at the end of the year. We go, we spent this many nights apart. But ultimately my goal is to, be able to just continue the business, to have the information that I can learn, to make it operate more efficiently, keep the people who we have employed with smarter, faster, brighter, whatever the things are that we do learn. And when we come together as consultants, and then, the second half of the year, have a bit of time to myself. So yeah, I haven't had a break for a while, but I'm looking forward to actually having some actual holiday time with my family.
And do you intend to do more fencing, fence mending?
No, not this trip. This trip, it's all about my holidays, isn't it? So this trip, I'm actually looking to go to into Idaho and into Montana. And nice. If you haven't watched Yellowstone, I ski instructed in Montana, and it is a place that calls me back. So I'm looking forward to getting back there. Although all of the things in the Yellowstone show being true, such as ski resorts and airports and development and yuppies, all those things will be there now, which we didn't have back then. But I just wanted to go back and see what it's like.
So you must have skied at Jackson Hole, right? I understand that's one of the better places to go skiing.
Yeah. The Rockies are great. Skiing is now a premium sport, though. You have to be fairly wealthy to have a weekend on the snow.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we were talking about
really
it a couple months back. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
And then even what we found is my son's just turned 18 a week ago. And, I said, look, you could do some kind of seasonal work. And we looked into it. It's ultra competitive now, to where before being like a lift operator was just like how you're going, and you just like, probably smoked, a couple of joints the night before and then run a tow. Now it's like, well, you actually have to have customer service experience, and you have to have, all of these other things. I'm like, this is shocking. This is,
wow.
The bar is now so high in society that they're selective on the lowest level jobs. So it's a very different time to get that world experience, and he won't have the same experience that I did. I probably was lucky to grow up when I did, and I learned about a micro generation the other day. There's a generation between 1977 and 1983, and this is a generation that grew up after the TV generation. So we ended up with technology in limited capacity through our education. The internet arrived at the end of that, but we didn't have access through our teenage years to mobile phones. Very, very specific category of people.
I'm a member of that generation, and I think is a really, like consequential sort of like timeline to have grown up a little before the internet, to have witnessed it sort of taking over, but like you said, not have the mobile phones be ubiquitous and have technology in everything. So we kind of could like see the before and the after, and leverage it to some degree potentially.
Yeah, and we know where people are all the time, and I don't still feel comfortable necessarily checking where my kids are on the phone, but they don't have any problem. All their mates know exactly where they are, and it's just like I find this disturbing. Right?
Yeah.
And so I was one of the first people in my friend group to get a mobile phone. And I used to get incoming phone calls from parents. It's like, is Patrick with you? No, he's not. Okay. And it was like, because it was that much of a novelty back in the late 90s.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. I mean, it's funny to me to think back to like making plans before cell phones, because you would arrive at a place at around the time that you planned, and that was like how people got together, And now, I mean, it's been like this for so long, but it's a constant renegotiation. Like, well, there's nobody really here. Let's like go somewhere else. Like the people that aren't there yet change their plan. I mean, it's just like all being reevaluated on the fly. But back in the day, as kids, we'd call from home, from the one phone that was in the house, and you make plans, and then you arrive at a location at a certain time. It was all prearranged, Now it's just this constant, refactoring. So it's just a whole different experience. Yeah.
And it's valid for us that we had that, and my kids will have their experience, and they'll look back on that as being like better than what it was when they're in their 40s and they've got kids getting something like drone picking them up and taking them to school, or whatever will happen in the future. So it's just constant. But I also think I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because just the pace of society and growth, and we talk about growth in our businesses. There is a certain point where expansion through growth is finite. We can't grow and expand everything forever. And so, being sustainable and working out how we can do those things in a meaningful way too is super important now, because the multiplier effect is real, because the population is so large. Or even when we look at our client base, I used to have a small number of clients, and they'd have some old computers, and it'd be 4 or 5 years of life before they replace them, and you have a couple of things that had to be dealt with sustainably. We have a full asset disposition life cycle program in our business now, which means that we tell the client when it's getting to being 3 years old, and we say, if you give it back to us at 3 years, we can sell it for a second life before it ends up being dead and going to landfill or wherever they send it. Ultimately, I don't trust where e-waste goes, but that means that we have to think about these things on an individual level. How many devices do we have? But then, how do we help our clients? Because I believe in the environment being protected. How do we help them do that? But not say it's environmentalism. We just say it's good business. So, because the push to sell new products now is, it's there, and the devices aren't we're not selling devices for 7 years anymore. Like a Mac Mini today is faster than a Mac Studio of 2 versions ago. It's silly to not replace, right? So we have to look at that from that perspective as well.
Yeah.
Were you the person who conceived that, or was there another business in your area that actually came up with that? Because that's obviously another ingenious program to do that. I mean, it helps you because you're not working on old devices, and it really, like you say, motivates the clients. And if you did carry that environmental flag, I think that'd be like a win-win.
Yeah, I've been very careful not to be causal or political with my clients, and so environmentalism or whatever it might be is sort of something that I try and navigate away. But it goes back to our contract. So the reason why we don't want to have a device, so we have a 3-year life cycle on devices, we have a 4-year life cycle on servers, and we have a 5-year life cycle on networking equipment. And after that, what we do is we give people a 12-month grace period. But if any of that equipment breaks in that grace period, we don't fix it. It just gets replaced, but we will support it until it breaks or it gets to the 12-month end point of that grace period, and then we won't support it anymore. Now,
when you say you don't fix it, let me just interrupt here. What does that mean? I mean, you don't have a repair bench in your organization, do you? No.
Not on team. I don't know how it works everywhere, but in Australia with AppleCare Plus, we actually have on-site service from Unisys, which I believe are a multinational provider. And in our office, we actually have a dedicated office that the guy comes in so often that he has his own workstation. So effectively, we do have our own service department, but we're not paying wages for that. And in some ways, it's better because they have SLAs with AppleCare. So they're there more quickly than if you send it to the break-fix department, to the Apple certified repairer. They've got a laundry list of people waiting for things for 2 weeks. So it's actually worked out really well.
Yeah, it's a great setup.
Yeah, I think I would really encourage people who sell Apple products to look at the life cycle of the device with the warranty component on top. So we build AppleCare into every product that we sell. The reason why is that if you travel, we can't help you if we're not near you. So Apple will help you if you're international. The other thing is if you pour wine into it, well, they'll still help you, which is handy. But then when we get to the thing where we say we won't help you, well, we can't get it repaired after 3 years when the AppleCare expires. So if you pour a drink into it after 3 years, it's got no value. So effectively what we're saying is we won't fix it. We will support the device and the person using the device, but the hardware, if the hardware is damaged, it just gets binned. So it just goes through the e-waste process, which is it goes to the e-waste company. They basically pay you cash for scrap, and they will securely destruct it. But bringing it back, if we can get the life cycle to occur before the warranty expires, and we can get people to replace the devices at 30 to 36 months, that product comes back, it's under warranty, we can get any repair done, and we sell it with warranty. And so they're getting 50% maybe or more of the value of the original purchase back through that life cycle. But if we say to the client, well, if you go after 36 months and someone damages it, you get zero, their appetite for doing so is like, well, we actually want to guarantee we're getting something back. But not everyone damages their laptop in that 36 to 48 month period. But usually what we do is we life cycle out. So we do this because we want to kill tool sets as well. So we don't support any Intel devices in our mainstream. I think we've got like 6 or 8 devices that are Intel for very niche reasons, and they won't go away because they're running like FileMaker on something that's never going to be upgraded or whatever it might be. But again, if that device stops working, it's very hard to continue to support that. So the company have to be aware that that's they're gliding slowly into the side of a hill, and it's going to happen one day. But when you end up in a situation now where everything's Apple Silicon, it can keep up with Apple's release cadence of features because they're all supported devices, and that helps us be more efficient. So the benefit to us is that we don't spin our wheels, working on a device that's out of warranty to get it repaired. We can keep our tool set lean. We can cut functionality off things that we don't have to worry about. So there's one side is the benefit to the client, the other side is the benefit to our business being efficient. But if you were an internal, and I think about this from the perspective, if you're an internal IT guy, you wouldn't get the same level of buy-in to convince them to do this, because as you highlighted, how did we come up with it? We just came up with it through seeing what other people do in corporate and just acting similarly. And everyone's like, I've got an old phone, where do I take my old printer? I don't know. We have rubbish bins. We have Origin E4 branded rubbish bins. They have a black bin with a yellow lid. It's an e-waste bin, and we will give it to a client and they can fill it up, or we just take it out now and then. And people can bring stuff in from home, or I don't care where it comes from. It's just a service. But we also partner with an e-waste company, and so we'll bring that e-waste back to our office. We'll split it into just general e-waste, and then there's like higher value. So that's the computers that might either able to be repurposed, or they have to be shredded, and then we have to get a destruction certificate. And then we're diverting this away from landfill. And then if there's value in it, if we've got that life cycle where we've just rolled out 10 devices to a company, 10 devices will come back. Some will be broken, but they're probably going to get $6,000 back from first generation M1 16-inch Pro. So that's off the bottom line for them. Like, we can just take that off the next invoice.
It's a great solution. Michael, I want to let you get on with your workday shortly here. One last question that just comes to mind on this topic, though, is this idea that I've been playing with for a few years of including hardware with my plans. To have like an ultra premium level of like a monthly plan that would just roll in leasing. So partner with a local finance company or Apple financing to write the lease and build that into our plan somehow, just to basically ensure, because you have policies in place, you kind of strongly encourage them to replace at a certain time, but you could actually just include it, and say at month 30, we spec the new hardware, we have it ordered in month, 35. And then by month 36, it's just a, swap with no downtime. Have you thought about that idea at all? Have you ever toyed with doing that?
Yeah. So, in the way that you're talking about it, we did explore working with a finance company to do something similar to that. We decided to not go down that path because the finance model that the client was facing on a percentage basis was just not competitive. We have in the past purchased equipment and owned the equipment and effectively done a managed service with hardware. So, but we are owning it and they are paying on a upfront basis, though. They're paying annually in advance because I'm not a bank. So I don't want to cash flow all of that hardware. But interesting you point this out because there are areas where it does make sense to be a managed provider. So we talk about managed services and we think about, what our colleagues sort of bandy around is like, people, device, whatever. A true managed service kind of would be if you say, we're going to give you a network in your office and the network is at the standard that you need the network to be, and we will guarantee that the network is up. So you're delivering an outcome, not a widget. And I think that's where we're happy to go into that managed services or, device or service as a service, I don't know what you call it. But when it comes down to the individual device, there's just too many things that can go wrong. Just your pin, again, it goes like to selling licensing from Microsoft, and Microsoft makes some variation. The client doesn't like it. The same goes if you pin yourself to a finance company and they do a variation and it doesn't reflect well, then they don't like you because you refer them. And, I think that's really important. Like, our reputation is important. It's not going to make you lots of money. You're better off finding things like, Backblaze rebates, push on something that actually provides value to the person. It provides you a drip feed revenue silently. So I would say steer clear around that. But assets, so if I was to talk about anything that's really transformed our business in the last 12 months, it's account management. A dedicated account manager. We started with him at the beginning of 2024. He wasn't an account manager. He actually came from a break fix Apple shop, and he's become a great account manager. And the thing that has been good about that is he cares about devices. And so asset management is a big part of what he cares about. So Tim is great at saying, here's a device, it's come back, it's broken, let me get it fixed for you. Client thinks it's great because we're fixing the device before it goes back to the next person. He's also proactive in saying, well, here's, the life cycle of these devices. And we've moved into a new asset management platform that's outside of our PSA, which the client owns. And inside that, it has the price that they paid for it. It has when is it going to fall into a replacement window. So when someone rings in and my computer is slow and it's in a replacement window, we can just go to the owner and say, hey, underperforming computer in the replacement window, can we get an approval? And it's really straightened out a lot of this stuff. But he'll also update the product that's replacing that product when it's, so each time, if it's an M1 Air and M4 Air is out, he'll just go in and put, this is the new replacement model and this is the price. And so all he's doing is moving all of these things that we used to do reactively on a programmatic basis. And then each time he wants to do a call about hardware, all the information's there. And if the client wants to check into their asset platform, they can see what assets are issued to certain people, and they start to see these numbers in there as well. So I think account management and asset management in terms of a sales branch of our business, and we do sell Apple. So we are an Apple reseller, and that gives us a competitive advantage over people who are not. But we do make a significant, over a course of a year, amount of sales of Apple devices. It's not an insignificant number. And because of that just sheer volume of dollars, we need to be careful that people don't associate that line item in their accounting system with Origin 84 as just being about services. Right? Because they go, well, we gave you $250,000 last year. But I firstly,
you got 50 computers out of it.
Exactly. We replace all your fleet, and my contract is a small component of that. And the thing is that we don't make very much money on that stuff. And that's the truth, right? So even when you're in a competitive environment and you're an Apple reseller, we're talking, no one makes more than double digits on an Apple product at full price, even if you've got the best capability to get, the lowest base buy price. I don't think that's a secret. I'm not breaching any NDA by saying that. But when you see a Best Buy selling it at 10% off, right, and we're going to sell it at 10% below retail, like no one else is getting that price, and they're subsidizing that by something in aisle 4.
Selling you a $50 USB cable or something like that.
100%. It's like the print. I remember selling printers when I was starting out 20 years ago. It was a $49 printer and it was a $35 USB cable.
Right. And then the ink was 50. Yeah.
And those inks that you get in the printer are only the running ink. So there's only going to be 5 pages.
Of the. Yeah, exactly. Right.
So, yeah.
So look, it's interesting. That's what you're competing with if you get in this racket of hardware sales and leasing.
Small margins.
So I think that for us, with all of the things that are going on, geoeconomic, geopolitical, relationships are important. Making sure you've got meetings that you're happening with your clients regularly, showing that value, showing that you're thinking about them when they're not aware that you're thinking about them, but telling them that you're thinking about them when you do it. And I think that's really these interactions that are meaningless potentially, like they actually are a non-productive interaction. It's all about making sure that they're aware that you're there.
It's mind share.
And so we need to bring ourselves out of the janitor's cupboard and be like trying to get ourselves as close as we can to sit at the seat that we want, which is the one next to the CEO. And if we can find ways to do that by talking about device life cycle, which the finance team care about, brilliant. Because your advocate becomes the finance person, not the CEO, because the CEO is busy. And then your next advocate could be, if you do have printers that you manage, make sure that you send a report when you go on site that you've restarted the printer and here is the status of the inks and you've got this many pages left to go, and would you like us to order a replacement? And so
Amazing.
all those soft opportunities that are there, if you're selling toner is very profitable. So I think that this is the moment in time where looking at those revenue streams, rather than attaching extra value to widgets that go to a device or a person, look around more, see what opportunities there are to make the internet faster, recontract the internet with a vendor that gives you a commission, upgrade the firewall to 2.5 or 10 gig or whatever it is today, and don't necessarily replace the Wi-Fi, just replace the firewall and the internet connection as phase one, and just say maybe in a year's time we'll do the Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi is always moving. So I think,
smart.
Again, like, this is really my mantra, which is just the more you talk, the more you find, and more problems that are coming up that we can solve, and that makes us more sticky and valuable, rather than going, it's hard to leave.
Yeah, that's great. I love that, flipping that around. Well, Michael, we could talk to you for another 2 hours, I'm sure, and harvest a lot more knowledge from your brain that Jerry has praised inadequately, because you're just a wealth of information here and sensible ways of running your business that I think a lot of people at all different scales can benefit from the 5 to the 50 user operation. So really appreciate all your time. It's been great to check in with you again. I do hope to see you at ACES, maybe even some other somewhere along the way of your travels.
Like anyone interested, reach out to me on the Mac Admins. I'll be in Austin and hopefully a couple of days ahead of the conference, and then look, if anyone's got a beach house or a ski chalet or something that they want to throw at me for a couple of nights, I'm happy to go anywhere for free accommodation, because I love seeing different parts of America. So, but yeah, look, thanks again to you for having me on, and I really appreciate the work that you do as well.
Well, I'm not one to chime in, but I have to throw in a little me too here, Michael. You're like I say, you're so generous with your knowledge that you like an open book. You don't hold back, and you've given a real gift to the Mac Admins community. Anybody who listens to this show for these next 2 hours is really going to come away with some really good information. So thank you for being so generous.
No, it's Absolutely. My pleasure, guys. Hopefully we won't take another year. We'll do it more soon.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Great deep dive on AI, and great hearing more about your business practices as well. Look forward to the next time and seeing you at ACES. Thanks again.